here's your host, Alex Garrett.
Well, welcome inside to another edition of Terminello's Take with Lou Terminello. And Lou, before we get started, I noticed this week the Maccabi Ranana of Israel faced off against the Brooklyn Nets, and here's what happened before the game. Take a listen to this, Louis.
Fans, the Brooklyn Nets and Barclays Center condemn the terrorist attacks and mourn the senseless loss of life in Israel. We stand together against terror, and our thoughts are with all who have been impacted by these tragic events. We ask you to please join us as we observe a moment of silence in honor of all who lost their lives and pray for peace.
Lou, always a classy organization your Nets organization is, right? That was, obviously there was scheduled before the terror attacks happened in Israel, but this was special, I'm sure, to be in that arena at that moment when the basketball team from Israel plays against the Nets.
Yes, and I know the team is on a tour of the NBA during this preseason schedule, but yes, it was obviously was the right thing to do. I wasn't even sure if the game was going to be played for a lot of different reasons, but they did, and obviously having them play in America, play against the NBA, maybe for a couple of hours they were just able to concentrate on basketball and just forget about the horrendous situation which happened last Saturday and now has developed into a war. So, the Brooklyn Nets, and I'm sure the league handled it correctly. I've been critical of the league in some of these situations, but they handled this one correctly.
So I just thought we'd start off with that because that's where your love of sports began before the Nets, but that's where your industry executive title came from, right? The Nets world. That's your baby.
Absolutely.
Right there.
Yes,
so,
it did.
All right, let's move on to some lighter news, because if you woke up this morning, you might have thought the Colorado Buffaloes were going to win that game last night. But my goodness, Lou, the collapse of Colorado. Can I call it that or what?
When you're up 29-0 at the half and you blow a lead to a poor Stanford team, that's a collapse. And I know Colorado is still a work in progress. I understand that. And Deion Sanders has done a spectacular job in 1 year of making Colorado relevant again. But, blowing a 29-0 halftime lead is just really unimaginable. But they did, and then they lost in double overtime. I'm going to be honest with you. I went to bed when it was 29-6, so I didn't see the remarkable Stanford comeback. But that one's going to stick for a while on the Colorado Buffaloes. So Deion's not happy, and he shouldn't be.
Apparently, his son was selling merchandise while the game was going on, which I think is kind of ridiculous. But that's another story for another day, and that's what the NIL has done, by the way. Sad to say. But the collapse of Colorado feels like a general statement now, because they've lost at least 3 or 4 of the last few games they've had here.
Well, even when they won their first 3 games, Deion kept saying, I need another 6 to 8 studs. And I'm sure he will get them because he has great recruiting powers. And especially now with NIL, that helps any recruiter. But they're not there yet. Their defense isn't good. But they scored 41 points on USC, and USC's defense isn't good. But that was still impressive to me. They're going to get there as long as Deion doesn't get lured away from his job at Colorado. You hear all kinds of rumors he's going to go to the NFL. I don't know if his style would play in the NFL, but we'll see. When he went to Jackson State, I said, what is Jackson State doing? And I was wrong. It was great for Jackson State. Yes, he was criticized by a lot of the historical black universities and colleges. The athletic directors weren't happy that after bringing Jackson State up, he scooted to a bigger job. But, that's the way it goes. He's done a great job at Colorado. However he's done it, he's done a great job at Colorado. But last night's things, it's part of growing pains as you put a program together.
All right. My team, you know who it is, the Irish, 30-year anniversary of the release of Rudy. And my God, they need Rudy Rudiger energy tonight against USC to get them out of their funk.
Yeah, they've been in an offensive funk the last couple of weeks. Let's face it. They lost 3 games in the fourth quarter, basically, and they could have won all 3 games. I guess there is some criticism of the coach, Marcus Freeman, 3 weeks ago against Ohio State. The last 4 minutes were poorly coached as far as time management, as far as some of the play callings where they could have killed another 30 seconds, and Ohio State would have never gotten that last-second touchdown, literally last-second touchdown. Against Duke, thanks to Sam Hartman's legs, not even his arms, turning a 4th and 16 to a first down, which eventually led to the winning points. And then last week in the fourth quarter, Louisville just had more staying power than them, and I'm surprised. I am surprised that they've been in these tight situations. I thought they were very, very good, and I think they're 5-2. I still think they're very good. They should be able to score tonight, but because USC's defense is poor,
but then they got to face Caleb Williams on the defensive end. So.
Absolutely, their offense is terrific. So.
And he's almost on a repeat of a Heisman year, right? I feel like Louis, or what? I mean, is he repeating himself, or what?
Well, he's absolutely in the mix. I mean, I don't think anybody has separated themselves from the pack yet as far as the Heisman Trophy. But, yes, he could be the first person to win back-to-back Heisman Trophy since Archie Griffin did it in 1974 and 1975. Tebow should have gotten it back-to-back, but they didn't give it to him. It's going to be very interesting. This is an interesting game tonight, no doubt about it.
Let's stick on the gridiron because I want to focus on the pros. I mean, college football is going to plan out. I'm just happy because my dad's home state, Oklahoma, just keeps winning and upsetting people. Like it's been amazing to see them on their run. But we'll get to that another day when we'll see where they go after this week. But staying on the gridiron, I think the Giants have a concern right now with their injury problems. And everybody's sort of like blaming the O-line, but maybe it's just an injury issue as well, huh?
Well, there are injury issues to the O-line in a league that has O-line injuries. Alex, 10 years ago, and I don't know what it is, you would very seldom see offensive lines get decimated by injuries. I don't know. They're always changing the offensive line rules and stuff, but they've made it better for the offensive line, which is just a head-scratcher. But so many teams have so many offensive linemen out or playing hurt. The Giants are in trouble. They are in trouble because of the injuries. Daniel Jones is not playing on Sunday night. They also have what looks like a talent gap between them and the rest of the teams that they're facing. I mean, this is not good, and it looks like they're going to be one of the contenders to pick in the top 5 of the NFL draft in the 2024 NFL draft. So,
is it funny to you? I've noticed that Dable's not caught much heat for any of this. It's kind of interesting that he's been sort of in the clear, whereas any other NFL coach on a 1-4 team would be feeling the heat right now. He seems to be kind of gliding. I know he's gotten some questions, but nobody in the media is saying fire Dable. You know what I mean? It's not. You're not getting that.
Right. And the thing is, Alex, maybe the media gives the New York media gives the Giants a little bit of a pass. Sometimes I feel that way, but you can't. This is not on Dable. You can't start putting it on Dable yet. You just can't. I mean, here was a guy who won Coach of the Year last year. Yes, the Giants did have a manageable schedule last year that they were able to navigate. This year's schedule is tougher, and they're not able to navigate. And but you can't start jumping on should Brian Dable be fired. Just look at all the coaches they've gone through. McAdoo,
Yeah.
Judge, Schumer, Shermer. You just can't keep going through all these coaches.
Well, I think long-term Dable's the answer. I just find it funny that the media that chews out any coach with a losing record here is kind of silent on Dable. That was my point.
Well, you're right. I mean, let's face it. The second half of the Mets season this year, the guy who was manager of the year and one of the best managers in baseball for the last 2.5 decades, they started greasing the skids for Buck Showalter. So you're right there. Now, it might, as the season goes on, and if the season continues to fall apart, the frustration of talk radio and the media, they might start putting pressure not only on him but on Joe Shane.
Yeah.
I mean.
And we talked about that last week. I said to you, what about the picks that they've been making? I mean, is there something wrong with this? Well, let me ask you this then, because I also am frustrated with the defense. They've let up a lot of points the last few games here, and no one's really complaining about that except me. Like, I just think the defense needs to shape up, and they're just letting these guys run through them. I don't understand it. This used to be a prolific defense, Lou.
Yeah, no, the defense has major problems. They're going in to Buffalo tomorrow night, which doesn't have as quick striking an offense as the Dolphins do, but they're coming off a loss in London last week to Jacksonville. I don't know if they're going to have jet lag. I don't know what how the team feels about coming from London, but it shouldn't be, in my opinion, it shouldn't be a big deal. I'm sure they're going to be focused on a Sunday night. The Giants are in trouble tomorrow night.
Well, we'll see. Now, your Jets, let me take a look here. Your Jets had a very impressive winning. I mean, I know Denver's weak, but any win the Jets have seemed to feel impressive. And look, I think you build off that win, and of course they face the Eagles here tomorrow. I mean, I can't see them being the Eagles' first loss, but you just never know. Football is a funny game this season.
Well, football is a funny game. I think the Jets' chances of winning against the Eagles on Sunday are very slim. Obviously, the Eagles have, I think, the best roster, if not in the NFC, in the entire NFL. They haven't hit their peak yet. That's the scary part. And they're 5-0. They have great team speed. They have a great offensive line. I mean, Dallas has a strong offensive line. Yes, they have a couple of guys hurt. Detroit has a strong offensive line. But the Eagles have a strong offensive line. They have a strong defensive line. I think the Jets will play hard. I think they'll play physical. But this is a game where you need a guy like Aaron Rodgers. This is why they got him for. And tomorrow will be the fourth time in the first 6 weeks that the Jets are playing a team that won 12 games the previous season. That has never happened in the history of the NFL, to show you how tough the first part of the Jets schedule is. And even without Aaron Rodgers, there's no reason that they should have lost to the Patriots at home. The Patriots are not better than the Jets. They do not have a better roster than the Jets. And that's a loss that's going to bite the Jets throughout the year. But again, last week, 2 weeks ago against Kansas City, Zach had a nice game. He had an okay game, but his game, it was a low bar to climb. I mean, Alex, last week, the Jets had 21 plays in the red zone. That's pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
You know how many times they threw into the end zone? 21 plays in the red zone. They threw to the end zone 0 times. If that was Rodgers, you know that wasn't going to happen. If that was any competent NFL quarterback, you knew that would happen. They'd take a shot at the end zone. What Zach did at the end of the half, I know letting the clock run out, they didn't even get a field goal attempt, is unforgivable. It's for a kid who is in his third year. And I know Robert Saleh was trying to say, well, it's on the coaches, it's on everybody. No, it's not. Whether you play high school football, whether when you were at BYU, Zach, or here, you've got to have a sense for the game. You can't let what happened happen. You can't let, and it was an easy field goal. You can't let that attempt not happen. So he's leaving points on the field.
Well,
and
yeah, and someone else that, I mean, it's almost, I'm watching a guy, compare and contrast, I guess. I'm watching a guy in Kansas City who is doing it with his feet. He's thrown a lot more interceptions than he normally does, which is a little disturbing, but they're still winning. So it's almost like Mahomes, like, in baseball, people say, well, the guy who's homers the most strikes out the most. Is that what we're seeing with Mahomes right now?
well, I mean, they really need another receiver, and I wouldn't be surprised at the trade deadline that they might try to pilfer another receiver from somebody in the NFL. And the NFL trade deadline, which I believe October 31st, used to be a yawn, a snooze fest. But the last couple of years, we've seen some trades. The McCaffrey trade from Carolina to San Francisco. We've seen some trades of significance. I think you might see that again before the trade deadline. They need another receiver, for sure. I think he made some bad decisions. They threw a terrible interception the other night when they were up 3-0 against a very bad Denver team. It's almost like, I don't know if he's not concentrating like he was, if he's become a little too complacent. But that being said, he's still the best quarterback in the league.
He really is. I mean, he keeps willing them to win every week. It's remarkable to watch. All right, so we'll see how that goes. And of course, the Broncos on the other side, while we have a minute here, they, Peyton might be on the chopping block here because at 1-5, you have Russell Wilson. I mean, is it Peyton? Is this falling on Peyton? I mean, that's what I'm hearing.
Well, what Peyton is doing, he's evaluating his roster. And Alex, he knows that this roster isn't very good. He knows that Russell Wilson is on the other side of the hill. I don't think Russell Wilson can be a big-time quarterback for sure. So he's not. Believe me, Sean Payton's going to be around for the next 3-4 years in Denver. That's for sure. But he's going to build the roster his way. He's looking at it, and I'm going to be honest with you. I thought that, and I was wrong. I thought that with Sean Payton coming in, I thought that Wilson would bounce back, but he hasn't. He's a shell of himself, and they're in trouble. With the quarterbacks coming out in the NFL draft this year, Sean Payton might be picking one of them because it looks like they're going to be picking in the top 5, 6, 7. The cap hit on Wilson is really, really tough for the Broncos' salary cap to absorb. But I think there's ways they can kind of get around it. I think there's some kind of injury stipulation that doesn't guarantee the $37.5 million, but they're going to have to move on from Russell Wilson.
Seems like it. All right, we mentioned the Eagles a little bit. I want to stay down the turnpike, and you know what I did? So obviously I live with my girlfriend now, but I go home sometimes, and guess what I took out of my my closet for the next series? All the Philly stuff I could find, because I am full on Phillies now, Louis. I mean, it was amazing to see them knock out 100-plus win team Braves, but the way they did it, not just they knocked them out, they hit homer after homer, and they just grinded out the at-bats. And, Harper really made Arcia pay for those comments, I got to say. And, the Braves once again make an enemy in the Northeast. They made one with the Braves, with the Mets. Now they've, I think, firmly cemented themselves as an enemy of the Phillies, if it wasn't before.
Oh, without question. And for the second straight postseason, the Phillies have a little bit of cachet. They're not afraid. Citizens Bank Ballpark for the second straight year. And Philly, let's face it, Philadelphia is a great sports town. Whether you like Philadelphia fans, you don't like the Philadelphia teams, but it's a great sports town. They get behind their teams very much like New York. The only thing is they just have one team to root for. We have two, and in some cases three when it comes to hockey. But let's face it. I'm going to tell you a couple of things. The Phillies have an excellent manager, an excellent team, and Bryce Harper for the second straight postseason is coming through. Bryce Harper, obviously, he was on the cover of Sports Illustrated when he was in high school. He was the next big thing. He's been an MVP 2 times. on two different teams. Even with all that, those accolades, in my opinion, I think Bryce Harper gets overlooked. I think he's underrated, an underrated superstar.
Well,
I really do.
Well, look, when he got hit by that pitch by Snell last year, intentional or not, that affected the Phillies big time, and they were in the middle of a playoff run when that happened. So,
absolutely. And you take a guy like Nick Castellanos.
Yeah.
The guy had a terrific playoff. He's had a great season. When the Phillies signed him, and I wanted the Mets to sign him because the Mets needed a right-handed, productive, professional hitter. The Phillies signed him. He got off to a bad start. The Philly fans jumped all over him like they jumped all over Trey Turner the first half of this year. But he's come through. He's another underrated player. He's not a star, but he's a solid major league hitter. Zach Wheeler.
Yeah. Yep.
Zach Wheeler. Let's face it. If Stephen Cohen was the owner of the Mets a year earlier, Zach Wheeler would still be on the Mets. I mean, I think the Phillies are only paying him only $19 or $20 million a year. He brought that Philly contract back to the Wilpons and said, "You match this, I want to stay with the Mets." They didn't. Zach Wheeler is a terrific pitcher. His first couple of years in the major leagues, he had control problems. Not anymore. I think he's underrated. I mean, is Garrett Cole that much better than Zach Wheeler? I don't think so. I mean, I still probably would take Cole if I had my choice, but the difference is very, very thin.
Yeah, Zach Wheeler, since his arm injuries, I mean, he's really bounced back from a lot of stuff, and he just solidified himself down in Philly, as has Castellanos. By the way, if you want Castellanos to hit a homer, read like a eulogy or something, because every time there's bad news, he sends a homer like the next pitch. I don't understand that one, but it is kind of funny.
Well, Castellanos, like I said, he's a solid right-handed, productive hitter that fits perfect in their lineup.
He's also the last batter Tom Brenneman called in Cincinnati, so there's that too. But
you see, I did not know that. But I know the at-bat you're talking about.
Well, that whole thing. By the way, Brenneman's had a resurgence. He's actually doing podcasting up in Cincinnati. I never realized that his family was based in Cincinnati to begin with, so that's very interesting to know that the whole Brenneman brand is up there.
Well, his dad, obviously a famous broadcaster, a member of the Baseball Hall of Fame, was actually the original voice for the Virginia Squires basketball team in the ABA, which had Dr. J and George Gervin and those guys. And he went from the Virginia Squires to the Cincinnati Reds, and where he became a Reds broadcasting legend.
Absolutely, and his son is also, he's got a great voice. I've always loved listening to Tom Brenneman call games.
And he didn't deserve to get fired. He misspoke on an open hot mic. He didn't deserve to get fired.
And that's on the engineer for releasing it. I'm sorry, but that's just like, it is, as an engineer myself and a lot of hot mics and radio, it's just, it's poor on the engineer. It's almost like they were out to get him, I guess. But anyway, one last thing about baseball, on the Phillies series, I should say, the Diamondbacks scare me, though. I gotta say, I mean, I know they're in Arizona, I know they're the Diamondbacks, but come on, I mean, you can't take them for granted because they did beat a Dodger team that did win 100-plus games and did win the division and did get home field. I mean, the Diamondbacks have always been a solid team this year. And you know what? They've been more consistent than a lot of the teams in the NL. Would you agree?
Absolutely. They really have a good young team. I mean, Corbin Carroll's going to win Rookie of the Year. Zach Gallen's a terrific pitcher. And former Met Paul Sewell is developed into a great closer for them. They're on the rise. This experience is going to help them get to that next level. 2 years ago, I think they lost 100 games. Yep. Torey Lovello is in his 7th year as manager. He's done a terrific job for them as manager. They won't be an easy out. I think the Phillies will win and prevail. I think we're going to see a repeat of last year's World Series. But before we get on to our next point, in the last 2 years, the 22 and 23 postseasons, 7 teams went into the playoffs with 100 wins or more. 6 of those 7 lost to their first opponent. Only the Astros won.
In other words, records mean jack, man. That's how I feel about it. But
yeah, no, it's looking that way. That records mean jack. I still think it's better to have them and play your odds that way. But last year the Phillies won 87 games. This year they won 90. But it looks like we might have a repeat of Philadelphia versus Houston.
You know, that Texas-Baltimore series kind of reminded me of the Mets-Padres series. I can't explain why, but it had very similar tones to it, you know, because everybody thought the Orioles, like the Mets, were going to go far, and all of a sudden the collapse happens in 3 games. I mean, that was a bit surprising considering how strong Baltimore was.
Considering Texas limped in to the playoffs and Baltimore hadn't been swept in the series, in 91 series, them losing the way they did, was surprising. Now, it's a good learning experience for Baltimore. The only guy who hit in those 3 games was Gunnar Henderson.
AL Rookie of the Year, you think, or what? I mean,
I would say so. I would say he's the Rookie of the Year, absolutely. And they're going to be good. I mean, they're just beginning. But I was surprised that they went, really, the last 2 games, they just went meekly. And that surprised me. The Dodgers, I'm surprised the Dodgers lost. But, again, the Dodgers have major pitching injuries that they couldn't sustain and probably wouldn't have been able to sustain through a long playoff run, even if they had beaten Arizona.
But Freddie Freeman and Mookie Betts went cold. That was surprising, too. Well, I mean, they went 1 for 51 or something like that.
Yeah, no, I mean, Betts didn't get a hit. Freeman didn't have a good series. I think he got 1 hit, and that's it. I mean, and they're a top-heavy lineup. You know, once you get to the middle of that lineup, that bottom of the lineup isn't very good. So really nothing to be afraid of. But the Dodgers will be back. They're always going to be good. And
Lou, how does New York stay interested? What I mean by that is I feel like once the postseason hits, and if it's not the Astros, nobody's watching the postseason here in New York. I hate to say that, but how do we as New York, New Jerseyans keep the fire going for baseball fans here to tell them, hey, keep watching this. This is fun stuff to watch, because I feel like it's dead. Now the focus is on hockey because that's our only hope right now in New York. So,
well, you make a couple of good points. As far as now, we got the hockey season and a couple of weeks to basketball season. We're in the middle of the football season. Our baseball teams are way behind us in the rearview mirror. You're right. But I think, and I've said this before, I think, they talk about St. Louis being a great baseball town, Boston being a great baseball town. I think New York is the best baseball town. And I know I might be in the minority about that. So people will watch, especially if it's Philadelphia and Houston again, because they're baseball fans. You're going to watch, I'm going to watch. But the fact that we have so many sports teams in New York, we turn the page quickly. And like you said a couple of minutes ago, even though the Giants have major injuries, the pressure's going to start to ramp up on Giant management. They missed this guy in the draft or that guy in the draft. They passed up Garrett Wilson in the draft.
Oh.
Nobody's brought that up. They gave Daniel Jones $40 million, and they could have given them Garrett Wilson, but they didn't. They drafted Evan Neal, number 7, who looks like almost a bust. I hate to say a guy's bust after a year and a half, and Thibodeau, who's okay, but we haven't seen him as what everybody thought he was going to be when they drafted him at number 5. So, but getting back to my point is, New Yorkers have a lot to focus on, more than probably any metropolitan area in the country as far as fans go. But I'm watching the World Series, and
I'm glad you mentioned. Yeah, I'll be watching too. We'll get to the Knicks in a second, but I want to finish your point because what you just said struck another question in me. But what were you going to say? Let me finish your thought first.
Well, I mean, Philadelphia and Houston, or even Philadelphia and Texas, And I'm not disparaging Arizona, who I think has done a spectacular job, and a lot of those guys are going to become household names. But you got stars. You got Real Muto. You got Bryce Harper. You got Zach Wheeler. You got Verlander. You got Bregman. You got Alvarez. You got Altuve. I mean, what more does baseball want?
And you know what I also think is that you might be not hearing from Met fans, but believe me, if Max Scherzer starts one of these games, they're going to be watching. I have to believe, especially if it's Scherzer or Verlander, that would be unbelievable.
Yeah, I don't know if what Bruce Bochy's going to do, if he's going to use Scherzer out of the bullpen because he hasn't pitched in 5 weeks. But that obviously gives Texas another arm that they need because Houston has better pitching, a deeper pitching staff right to the closer. But one thing, Bruce Bochy, Dusty Baker, non-analytic managers got to the one of them is going to be in a World Series.
Well, how about this one? Speaking of Bochy, he actually faced the Rangers and beat the Rangers in the World Series when he coached the Giants. Right. So this feels like a full circle moment if they advance, and maybe he gets a ring with the Rangers also. All right, I'm glad you mentioned the Knicks because I'll tell you what, the Evan Fournier drama really is sad. The guy was supposed to be this huge star. He was for a while. He was on the Post cover. They were making, because he was French, they were kind of having fun with that too. Then all of a sudden he's like, am I ever going to play again with the Knicks? That is just poor management of the Evan Fournier situation. But he could be utilized this year. I don't know why they didn't use him in the playoffs last year.
Well, again, it looks like it's a bad fit. It looks like it's just a bad free agent sign. Like Kemba Walker, he doesn't fit in. And the Knicks will have a pretty good team. They should be able to avoid that play-in tournament again. They're in that gray area. They're not good enough to go deep into the playoffs and win a championship because they don't. You have to have that star, that difference-making star. And teams tried. Some succeeded, some didn't. But the Knicks are going to be decent. And I don't think there's a place for Fournier. And this is the business of pro sports. I mean, I think if they could, and it wouldn't hurt their cap, I think they would move him, cut him, do something. I don't know if he's going to make the roster. I mean, the roster is still about, they're about 10 days away from finalizing the rosters.
Is Harden going to get moved? I know that's some speculation still going on with Philly. I mean, he shows up, but I think that he still wants to be traded, right? So,
Look at history, Alex. When guys want to be traded, they get traded. So I expect him to be traded. And again, I said it before, it's just a bad look for the NBA, in my opinion, how these guys control where they want to go. And I know it's happened in a lot of sports, but it happens in the NBA more than any sport. And I don't think it's a good look. And I think that's why some fans get turned off by the NBA.
And that's why I got worried when Scherzer was traded after complaining to management about that trade deadline, because I'm like, I hope it doesn't leak into baseball now. You don't want that to leak into baseball.
Well, again, I don't think Scherzer demanded to be traded, but somebody got into Cohen's head because a couple of weeks earlier, they made a trade for Trevor Gott to shore up the bullpen, and they took on another contract, $4 million, and they immediately cut him. And so at that point, he was still taking on money and probably trying to win at any cost. But somebody got, and again, I don't notice for sure. This is just me surmising from afar. Mm-hmm. Was David Stearns involved in that strip down of the team and saying, well, I'm coming, but I'm stripping down the team. You might as well do it now. I don't know, Alex. Just a thought on my part.
Well, and then Sandy Alderson gets resigns because of investigations with Major League Baseball. I haven't heard a lick about that. Do you know what that's about? Or
you mean
sorry, Epler resigned.
Right, Billy Epler. Yeah, I don't know, but I haven't heard anything more about that. But Alex, if you think that Billy Epler is the first guy to falsify an injury to put a guy on disabled. This is Major League Baseball. I mean, you got to be kidding. I mean, that I'm sure that happens all the time.
Well, how did the Yankees not know? We've talked about this before. How did the Yanks not know for 2 months that Rizzo had a concussion? That one is still.
Yeah, and that's the other end of the spectrum. How could their medical staff not know that?
Yeah. Well, I remember the Mets fired their trainer a few years ago because of these very reasons, and they still had injury problems. It's very strange with all that. All right, Lou, so we've covered a lot today on Terminello's Take. I know you hate predictions, so I won't ask you about that, but I think we've got a pretty good preview from you about all this. Any more to add on the NHL? I know that's one of your big wheelhouses, is the NHL.
Yeah, well, the season just started this week, so we're still gathering information, but the Devils have gotten 3 out of their first 4 points, and even though I am not the Devils, I like the Devils, but they're not the team I root for. But obviously, you'll always hear fair and balanced analysis on Terminello's Take. The Devils are very good, and watching opening night with Jack Hughes, I love the guy's game. I mean, besides Connor McDavid, obviously he's the best player in the world. You can really put Jack Hughes into that next group of players. He had a great game on Thursday night, and last night they lost in the shootout. But he made a move in overtime that looked like it was going to be a game winner, and it didn't happen. But Nemelka made a great save for the Coyotes. So I think they're going to be an interesting watch all year. And the Islanders begin their season tonight. So we see what they look like. I mean, it's basically the same team that we've seen the last 2 years. I don't know if anybody's going to lift their game, which they really need. So we'll see with Horvat and Matt Barzell together from the beginning this year, and we'll see how they do. Because remember, 4 or 5 games in after the trade, Barzell got hurt.
Right.
So
now, of course, the Bailey's lost. That's kind of a big deal. Although I see he just got released again, right, or something like that.
Yeah, he got released again. Yep. I know he was in Ottawa on a tryout basis, and I don't think he made the team. I did not check. I know, but again, he had an outstanding career with the Islanders, and if this is his time that he's done, he's done. But it should be an interesting hockey season, especially here in New York, and the Rangers obviously showed all the things that make them a contender. They can score in a power play. They can score shorthanded. Chris Kreider had 4 points the other night. They have a great goaltender.
Need him. Need him this year, that's for sure. And of course, of course, I think it's a Zibanejad also because he was being injured. You want to see how he plays off those injuries and see if he recovers fully. There's that too, and there's some fun stuff. And of course, my other eye is on the Blackhawks and the other Connor Bedard. He finally gets his first goal the other night, and I was happy for the kid.
Well, he's the real deal. I mean, the only thing that with Bedard is we just have to see how quickly he progresses to that next level. I mean, the guy's played 2 games, so we're not going to. It's way too early. The kid's 18 years old, but we're going to see how quickly he gets to that next level. And Alex, he's a budding superstar. That's for sure. It's a overall number one pick. That's not going to end up being a bust.
No,
not if he keeps it straight.
I don't think so. And and I see the Leafs the other day had this whole situation with Austin Matthews scoring a hat trick, and they all threw their scarves on the ice instead of caps. I don't know. It's a weird city up there when it comes to hockey. I know they love their hockey, but they're wondering why the suits are in the lower bowl and not the fans, I guess, is the complaint now up there. But, it is what it is. This is the year for the Maple Leafs. If they don't win they have to win more than a couple playoff series. I don't know. The Austin Matthews era is not going to last forever.
Well, you're 100% right. And I know it's only 1 game, but the Maple Leafs have the pressure on them, and the Edmonton Oilers have the pressure on them. And I know it's only 1 game it's 8-month grind to get to the Stanley Cup Finals. So I'm not going to put any deep thought into what happened the other night. But the Edmonton losing their opening game 8-1 in Vancouver. Oh my God! I mean, you talk about the media pressure on them and the Maple Leafs. It's real.
Of course, the pressure is because of the Oilers and the legacy they have, much as like the Maple Leafs. I mean, McDavid being compared to Gretzky a lot, and I don't know. People say he should come to America to play, and that would be very Gretzky. I think he's just better suited in Edmonton. I don't know. What do you think?
No, you're right. Obviously, he doesn't have to come to America to play. But again, I love McDavid. He's the best player in the world by miles. But he's got to take the bull by the horns during one of these playoff series, and actually during the regular season too. Make sure they're in position to go far in the playoffs. I don't know how they could lose 8-1 the other night on opening night.
Oh.
That just stuns me. But you talked about Gretzky a couple of seconds ago. What Gretzky said about the Devils when we were talking about the Devils' potential. Gretzky said, talk about putting pressure on a team. Gretzky said that in a few years the Devils could be like the Oilers of the '80s, which he was the best player on, obviously, when they won 4 Stanley Cups in 5 years. And,
we didn't even get into this, but of course, one of my dad's favorite players passed away this past couple weeks ago, and the Bears are going to wear number 51. But what can you tell us about Dick Butkus? Because my dad lauded him and just, lavished a lot of. He loved the guy, basically watching him play and his toughness. What about you? What did you think about Butkus on the field?
Well, Dick Butkus, he went to the University of Illinois, and he was in the Bears drafted, and I think just like 3 picks away. They drafted Gale Sayers, and then they followed with Butkus. I think there was only like 3 selections difference in the first round. They had these 2 great players, but they only had 1 winning season when those guys were there, and that's the shocking part. It's almost a little bit like what we talked about with Connor McDavid, and Leon Draisaitl.
Yeah.
But Butkus was the prototypical linebacker, the guy who backed the line. He was tough. He didn't play outside the rules. And remember, the rules in those days are different than the rules are today. He was a sideline-to-sideline linebacker. He played hurt. He was physical, and he was smart.
And definitely felt like a media presence from what I've seen also. He's a very big media guy also.
Well, he after playing football, he became an actor. He was in commercials. I believe he was in the Miller Lite commercials, which was so popular in the 70s.
Was he in Brian's song or no? I heard something like he was in that movie.
I don't recall him being in Brian's song. I don't think him or Sayers were in Brian's song. I mean, Billy D. Williams played Gale Sayers. James Caan played Brian Piccolo. But I don't think there were, and I haven't seen. I've seen the movie, but I haven't seen it in a long time. I don't recall any NFL players or any Bear players who played in that movie.
Well, it's a big loss, and I know now the team's playing for Butkus. It seems like that's what Justin Fields said on the post-game show that night of their first win, which happened to be the night of Butkus' passing. Interestingly enough, so. It just when there's when legends pass, that motivates a team. I got to be honest about that.
Well, I mean, I think you're right. I mean, I think anything that affects a franchise, that affects the clubhouse, I think that issue between the Braves and the Phillies, I think juiced up the Phillies the other night also.
Mm-hmm. Juiced up the Phillies, juiced up the fans. I mean, not the fans are already rocking, but that added a lot of it. Remember, I mean, look, Brave players have stuck their foot in the mouth. Welcome John Rocker into the conversation. I'll never forget that because, well, if you remember, he said a lot of crap about New York and riding the subways and everything. And if you remember, they had to bolt down the bullpen so no one would throw anything in there. That was that was crazy.
I remember. And, he was going after the people on the number 7 line.
Right.
Alex, when I lived in New Jersey, well, I still live in New Jersey, but to get to New Jersey to Shea, if you didn't drive, and you decide to take mass transit, I had to take that number 7 line. So he was talking about me.
And of course, the Braves the Mets had their number a little bit those years because that was around the time of the Grand Single and all that other stuff. I mean, those are some great Met years. Even though they didn't win a ring, that was a fun time to be a Met fan. But Rocker definitely added that era, I gotta say. Which is partly why I was surprised the Ducks signed him years later. I was a little confused about that one, but it is what it is. Well, Lou, this has been fun. This has been a pleasure. Anything else you want to add before we run out the clock today on Terminello's Take?
Well, the only thing, my parting shot is, and there's nothing that caught my eye, I'm just telling you, I'm not a general manager, I'm not an owner of a major league team, but I would really be careful before I start paying pitchers these ridiculously high salaries. Every day I see somebody is going to miss 2024. Alcantara is now going to miss next year. It looks like Kyle Wright, who won 21 games last year in 2022, is going to miss all of next year. It looks like Brandon Woodruff for the Brewers is going to miss all of next year. And I'm missing 4 or 5 guys off the top of my head. So I have a feeling I don't know if the starting pitcher is going to go the way of the running back, which, they're not getting paid like other players in different positions in the NFL. I'm telling you, I'm never paying a pitcher, if I was a general manager, $35 million to go 6 1/3 innings or 5 2/3 innings. I don't, because everyone's getting hurt. Buehler was hurt all year for the Dodgers. Dustin May was hurt all year for the Dodgers.
And Buehler's perennial hurt. I've heard Buehler's name be hurt like a few years now. I mean, it's not been good for him. But
no, I mean, and we can name 20 other guys. I mean, Means came back. John Means came back for the Orioles, pitched in September, but was hurt for the playoffs after missing well over a year. I mean, something has to be done. I mean, Tommy John is the first guy to have Tommy John surgery. And boy, Tommy John, I've seen interviews where he says he hates that he was the first guy to have Tommy John because he doesn't like his name associated with the surgery. But anyway, the year after and this was in the mid-'70s, that he had Tommy John surgery, he pitched over 250 innings. And they do not have all the advancements on Tommy John surgery that they have now, and guys barely can go 150 innings. So they got to get a hold of this pitching situation in Major League Baseball.
They really do. Well, maybe you'll forward this up to the front offices of all 30 teams. How about that? And see what happens.
That's a good deal.
All right, Lou. Thanks so much as always for joining Terminello's Take on the Sports Spotlight, and we'll do it again next time.
Looking forward to it as always. Thank you, Alex.